All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we can go ahead and get things rolling here. Thanks for joining us for the information webinar for the 2025 Technical Assistance Program. We are recording this so that we can post it to the website and share um, after the meeting today, just in case you need to come back to it, or if others who are interested weren't able to attend, you can listen and watch it again later. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Lauren Cardoni. I am the Active Transportation and Safety Program Manager here at MORPC, and I help to run the Technical Assistance Program along with some of my other team members who are on the call as well today. For the informational webinar, we'll provide a quick overview of what the Technical Assistance Program is, who is eligible for it, and what the requirements are to apply. And then we'll walk through the activities that have been identified for the 2025 program that you can apply for. And we'll walk through the application process as well so that you have that information. You are welcome to either unmute or type questions into the chat as we go along. We'll pause in a few places just to check and see if folks have questions, but then we also have time at the end. So we will dive into things here. For the MORPC Technical Assistance Program, we provide MORPC staff time and assistance to local governments and other MORPC member organizations that are inside the boundary of our metropolitan planning organization. And that's our MPO area, and we'll show a map of that here in a minute. And this staff time is dedicated to conducting what we call community-based planning services that are specifically intended to advance the goals that were adopted in our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or the MTP. And those services are intended to implement specific strategies adopted within the MTP, but specifically those that are focused on improving safety, active transportation, and transit-related infrastructure throughout the region. So we'll highlight some of those specific strategies here shortly, but a full list of them is available in the Technical Assistance Program Guide that you can access on our Technical Assistance webpage. The Technical assistance services are awarded through a competitive application process, and we just opened that for 2025 on Monday this week. So the application process is now open, and we'll walk through, as I said, some highlights of that application process here today. And then once those applications are submitted and we close the application window, we have a dedicated evaluation committee comprised of external partners who help us to assess the completed applications based on the criteria that are outlined in the Technical Assistance Program Guide. And we'll discuss some of that today as well. And lastly, applicants who are awarded technical assistance through the program have to collaborate directly with MORPC staff on those services and work toward completing those services within a 6 to 9 month period. So these are supposed to be relatively quick turnaround initiatives. So as I mentioned, all of the services that we've identified for this particular program are intended to help us implement the strategies identified in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP. And we've just got a couple of slides here to highlight the specific ones we've identified that focus on, again, improving safety, active transportation, and transit-related infrastructure. So the full list is in the Technical Assistance Program Guide, but just for a quick reference, what we're really looking to do through this technical assistance program are to help increase um, the presence of safe and comfortable infrastructure for people walking and bicycling within Central Ohio, and that includes trail facilities. So we look to implement the Central Ohio Greenways vision and increase the number of trails across the region, as well as implement our regional active transportation plan and the recommendations within that. And then generally, this program also really emphasizes collaboration across communities and jurisdictional boundaries. Additionally, uh, some of the other strategies that we hope to implement through this program focus on improving safety throughout the region, so collecting and analyzing crash data and prioritizing investments to improve safety on our roadway system, and again, collaborating across communities and jurisdictional boundaries. And there's also, and we'll talk about this in the application overview later, but some of the criteria focuses on how uh, we can complete these services and conduct planning processes with equity in mind. So as far as who can apply to the technical assistance program, there are a few minor criteria that an applicant has to meet. So anyone, any local government or current MORPC member is technically eligible to apply as long as they are within that metropolitan planning organization boundary, which is shown here on the screen. So it's primarily Franklin and Delaware counties, with some small portions of Union, Licking, and Fairfield. The services that are being requested by the applicant must be within the scope of services that we've specified within the program guide, or generally fall within a similar scope, and also must be within MORPC's staff area of expertise. So it has to be somewhat related to the services that are identified in the guide. We also require that the application that is submitted has to be complete. And again, we'll walk through what that looks like later. Um, and that includes submitting a customized scope of work, as well as a letter of commitment that's signed by a member of the leadership team from the applicant agency. And then for this year, the deadline for the applications is 5 p.m. on Friday, October 11th. So the completed application must be received prior to that deadline in order to be eligible. And we'll have a final slide later that highlights all of the important dates and deadlines for quick reference. So the last informational slide about the program requirements. This goes over what is required of applicants specifically when they look to apply to the program. So as part of their commitment to receiving the technical assistance from MORPC, the applicant uh, must specifically designate one of their local staff um, to be a project manager for the requested activities. So the applicant agency actually has to dedicate their own staff time to collaborating with MORPC staff to complete these services. And within the application, we specifically ask for an estimate of how many staff hours they anticipate committing to the activity. We also require that the local agency provide any relevant data, documents, materials, previous plans, other related information that MORPC doesn't already have. We ask that the participating agency um, coordinate with all of their internal departments to ensure that all the right people are engaged in the process. We also require that they assist with the identification of relevant stakeholders. So external to their agency, we want to make sure we're engaging all of the right parties in the planning process. And we also require that the designated project manager participate in regular virtual meetings with MORPC staff to ensure that the services can be completed in a timely manner. Generally, that is a biweekly coordination call that can be 30 to 60 minutes, just depending on the need for uh, that section of the schedule. Let's see. And the last thing is we do ask that in order to keep things on time and on schedule, that the applicant agency or awarded agency responds in a timely fashion to any deliverables or materials that are submitted to them from MORPC staff for review. All right. Are there any questions about that initial information about the technical assistance program in general? And again, you should be able to use the chat function. Looks like there's also a Q&A box, or I'm not sure if you're able to unmute in this format, but any of those options that you have available. All right, so moving on. For the 2025 program, we've identified several different types of activities that are intended to help guide our Central Ohio communities. We'll go through each of those activity types here for your reference. So we have first just a quick overview. All of the activity types are grouped into these four main categories. So they generally fall within the realm of active transportation planning, visioning for the Central Ohio Greenways system, bicycle and pedestrian safety, or land use planning. And then we do have the option for communities to apply for assistance on a project that differs from the product types outlined here. Um, but there are specific requirements for that we'll talk about shortly as well. So applicants are encouraged to select from one of these predetermined service types, and each of them have a sample scope of work that's outlined within the technical assistance program guide. Those sample scopes are just intended to be a brief outline that an applicant would take and modify to suit their individual community needs and then submit as part of their application. So we'll walk through each of those service types here. And again, feel free to ask questions as we go. So in the category of active transportation planning, we have three different potential service types that we identified for the 2025 program. And those include active transportation project prioritization, complete streets policy development, and transit supportive infrastructure planning. So when we talk about the active transportation project prioritization activity, the ultimate goal with that service is to deliver a prioritized plan of active transportation facilities that a local community can then take and apply for funding to either conduct a feasibility study or design and construct the recommended facilities. The other potential opportunity or option with that service type is just to have a prioritized list of projects for a local community that can then be added into the next Metropolitan Transportation Plan update to make those projects eligible for MORPC federal funding. So the second service type in this category is a complete streets policy development. So this activity would ultimately result in the development of a complete streets policy that the community would then take through a formal adoption process and adopt it into their policies and procedures. Then the third service type within this category, the transit supportive infrastructure planning activity. This is similar to active transportation project prioritization, so identification of active transportation facilities, but it would focus specifically in communities with existing transit services and where and how that community can plan for uh, facilities to better access those transit services. So the second category of services was our Central Ohio Greenways visioning. And within this category, again, we have three potential service types. So this includes Central Ohio Greenways vision refinement, trail access and connectivity planning, and then trail town visioning and community placemaking. So for the Central Ohio Greenways vision refinement activity, this essentially takes a look at the existing vision for the Central Ohio Greenways network across the region and either works to develop a refined alignment for one of those proposed trail facilities or an additional alignment to connect into that regional vision. And ultimately, the goal of this activity is to lead to a feasibility study or application for funding to implement the proposed trail alignment. The second service type in this category is the trail access and connectivity planning activity. This again focuses on the Central Ohio Greenways network, but more specifically access to that network. So we'd be looking at a regional trail within a community and how people can safely walk or bike to access that trail facility. And then the third service type within this category is a relatively new service. This is the Trail Town Visioning and Community Placemaking activity. And the goal with that particular activity is to develop what's called a community readiness assessment and community trail profile to help promote a community's connection into the regional trail system uh, and help them to develop again better access and connectivity to the trails. The third category of technical assistance is bicycle and pedestrian safety. And similar to the previous two categories, there are three services under bicycle and pedestrian safety. We have complete street safety audits, systemic pedestrian safety analysis, and safety action plan development. A complete street safety audit is a I wouldn't say totally comprehensive, but it's at least an overview assessment of conditions for walking and bicycling within a community. We analyze crash data, crashes involving people walking and bicycling to understand where the priority safety areas are within a community, and then we'll conduct a walk audit at one or more of those locations to better understand those conditions and where improvements might be needed. And the second service type is the systemic pedestrian safety analysis. And this is a little bit more focused on pedestrian safety specifically, and will analyze crashes involving pedestrians across a community to identify specific improvement types that could be implemented on a large scale across the community, so in multiple different locations. Typically, this is a lower cost type of countermeasure, such as high visibility crosswalks that could be installed in many different locations all at once. And then the final service type within this category is a safety action plan. And this activity is specifically designed to address requirements within the federal Safe Streets and Roads for All program. So this activity works with a local community to develop a comprehensive safety action plan, which requires a more detailed assessment of all crash data and conditions within a community. It results in an action plan that identifies specific strategies to reduce fatalities and serious injuries within a community. And then in our final category of land use planning, we have two potential service types. This includes transit-oriented development planning, as well as a conceptual development framework. So the transit-oriented development planning activity works with a community to assess their local policies and codes and identify where improvements can be made to provide more opportunity for transit supportive development. Through that activity, we hope to see changes in policy or code, or the development of specific strategies for transit-oriented development within the community. And then the second service type, conceptual development framework, allows a community to identify specific best practices and development principles for a particular site or strategic location within their community to set the stage for future development. This activity ultimately results in a vision, as well as planning and design principles for future development at the identified site. So then lastly, I mentioned that if a community is interested in applying for a project that differs from the service types we just went through, that is a possibility, but the application must include a pretty detailed scope that outlines the request and also aligns with the parameters established within the Technical Assistance Program Guide. And as a reminder, that includes our goal of implementing strategies identified within the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, as well as moving projects and recommendations from the Regional Active Transportation Plan and Central Ohio Greenways Vision further toward implementation. Any questions on the service types for the 2025 program?
Lauren, this is Padmini. I could always ask you this question otherwise, but since I'm here, I'm going to ask it at this venue. Could you
Go for it.
speak a little more on the conceptual development framework? You spoke about how that uh, plans through the vision and then also the plan for development. And I'm curious to know that what are all the aspects of development would such a framework include?
That's a tough question. Um, can you, I guess I'm trying to understand what specifically you're asking.
Okay.
Aspects of development.
So if I'll pick Worthington because I live there. So if they want to come and talk about a TA program around conceptual development framework, could that be like a comp plan or could that be an economic development plan? Uh, like what are the aspects of development is the program focused on? Does it have to be related to transportation or the greenways or say safe streets? uh, I'm trying to understand what the guardrails are, and if anything outside that falls into a different category of planning.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think that is actually a really good question because it sort of relates back to MORPC's community-based planning services program and the consultant assistance that we offer separately from the technical assistance program. And we probably should have added a slide about that to show the relationship. So we will not do full comprehensive plans or land use plans or anything like that through the technical assistance program. This conceptual development framework is more of a strategic look at a specific site or study area within a community. So you can see the example on the screen was from work we did with Jefferson Township a few years ago in an area they call Black Lick Station. And we worked with them to identify what they thought would be the most likely and beneficial land uses for specific sections of that study area, and then how we could, or they could, appropriately develop that area to accommodate the transportation needs of the community. So we looked at existing crash data and travel patterns and worked with them to do community outreach to understand community desires as it related to the development of that area, and worked to create a proposed network for new roadways that would better connect to this part of the community, as well as active transportation facilities that would allow them to be able to walk and bike throughout this area in the future as well.
Okay, so when I think of land use planning, is so much of that perception is driven by zoning codes. So this is a totally different take on land use planning. So it's good to know that there are different kinds. And yes, I think adding the community-based planning program to show like this is what they do, but this is not something we do might be more descriptive. But thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, any others about the service types? Okay, moving on, we will get into the application itself. So the application for the 2025 program is available online. This opened on Monday this week, so you should be able to access it and start filling out the application. You can go through the whole form without filling anything out, just to get an idea of what's in it, how it works. The link is available on the Technical Assistance Program website, and all of the details of what's in the application is also in the Technical Assistance Program guide. So when you click the link to the application, you'll find yourself on the landing page that looks like the screenshot you see here. And this page essentially just tells you how to complete the application. So I recommend that you read through this landing page before you start working your way through the application itself. There are a few key things to note. Again, all of the relevant details and information are included in the program guide, so make sure you read through that as well. But the application itself is only 4 pages long. It's fairly simple. You can see a couple of highlights on the screenshot here. You are able to save your progress as you go through the application and return to it later. I believe it sends you or it gives you a link that you can use to access your partial application later on. You are also able to attach files to your application, but you can only do that right before you plan to submit the application. Anything that you attach will not save if you try to save and come back later. So we'll highlight that again here in a few slides. And then all of the fields within the application are required. So you have to fill out the full thing in order to be able to submit it. So once you read through the instructions, you can click the Start button, and that will take you to the first page of the application. The first 2 pages are just general required documentation. So this first page requests the contact information for the applicant and designated project manager. So whoever you anticipate collaborating with MORPC staff throughout the process should be listed here. And again, you can click Save and Resume later here, and it will provide a link for you to return to your application. Or you can keep going by clicking the next button at the bottom of the screen. So that will take you to the second page of the application where you can select the specific activity type that you want to request from us. So that's this first drop-down box on the screen. All of the activities that we just walked through will be listed here in the drop-down box. We also ask on this page for you to provide an estimate of how much staff time your organization or agency plans to commit to the planning process. And then you'll notice this item in the center here, preferred scope of work. This is where we remind you that you have to submit a detailed scope of work. So you can go back to the program guide and copy some of the language from the sample scope of work to refine and submit here, but you won't be able to attach your file until the end of the application. So we'll come back to that later as well. And also on this page, again, you can click Save and Resume later, or continue through the process by clicking the next button. So the third page is the most complicated section of the application because it includes 6 different questions that determine how each application will be evaluated. And we'll go through these toward the end of the webinar here today. But these are open-ended questions with a character limit to them. So they should allow for about 500 words. And then as you type into each of the text boxes, The numbers at the bottom right corner of each text box will tell you how much space you have remaining. And then at the bottom of this page, you'll also see the save and resume later option, or you can continue through the application by hitting the next button. So then the final page of the application is where you'll upload the required attachments before you submit. This page also has a link to a sample letter of commitment that you can use to fill out with your organization's information and have leadership from your organization sign and then submit. So again, you're only able to upload your files when you're ready to click the submit button. The form stack dashboard will not save your attachments if you select save and resume later after uploading them. So just remember, don't upload your files until you're ready to click submit. Okay, and then a couple of quick notes on those two required attachments. So I've mentioned a few times now that there are sample scopes of work provided in the Technical Assistance Program Guide. You can see an example of one here on the left. But we ask that when you apply to the program, you modify these to suit your particular request and your community before you submit it as part of your application. So we hope to see a little bit of additional detail beyond what's provided in the program guide. And then this is a screenshot of the letter of commitment that we provide in the application. So we ask that you either download a copy of this and tweak it to suit your community, or you create your own that addresses the same requirements. And then again, it has to be signed by a member of the leadership team in your organization. Any questions on the application process or form stack website, any of that information? Okay, well, we're getting to the end of things here. So as I mentioned, we have a dedicated evaluation committee made up of external partners who help us to assess all of the applications that are submitted. And they do that based on the application criteria, which are all outlined in the Technical Assistance Program Guide, but we'll go through those here. So the first criterion is community objectives. And this is where we ask you to tell us why the service that you are requesting is important for your community, as well as how you think assistance from MORPC staff will benefit that activity. If your community has other planning documents that reference the need for this type of study, you can mention that here. And then scoring for this particular criterion will be based on how clearly the community objectives are described, how well they align with our regional documents like the MTP, ATP, and COG vision, and then whether or not technical assistance will provide benefit to that service. So the second criterion is MTP strategies. So this is where we want to hear from you about the specific strategies we talked about early on in this webinar that you hope to address through the requested service type. So this should include detailing of your vision for how the completion of the selected activity will result in implementation of the strategies that you list here. So scoring for this one will depend on how clearly you make that connection between your requested activity and the advancement of those specific MTP strategies. Moving on, the third criterion is implementing regional priorities. So this is your opportunity to indicate how you see the requested service advancing specific regional plans toward implementation. So as we talked about earlier, the goal with the technical assistance program is really to move projects that are identified in regional plans toward implementation. So again, that's the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the Active Transportation Plan, and the Central Ohio Greenways Vision. So scoring for this particular criterion will be based on how clearly your response demonstrates that connection. And then number 4 is equity considerations. It's question number 8 in the application. That's why the numbers are a little off or confusing. So equity considerations is where we ask you to identify specific populations within your community who are currently underserved and might specifically benefit from the requested service. And scoring for this criterion will depend on identification of the specific populations and how clearly your response demonstrates the potential benefits to those groups from this activity. So then the last 2 criteria include local commitment and collaboration, which is where we want to know how much the larger community will be engaged in this planning effort. While we don't typically conduct public engagement through these services, we do expect key local and regional stakeholders to be involved. So scoring for this criterion will be based on your identification of potential relevant stakeholders and how we might engage them through the process, as well as what opportunities that engagement could bring about. And then the final criterion is leveraging investment, which is where we want to know what your plans are for what comes next. We want to make sure that these are not just plans that sit on a shelf. So we really want to know, once this activity is completed, what do you hope to do with the resulting deliverables and information? So scoring for this criterion will depend on how well you demonstrate your vision for successful implementation. Any questions about the evaluation criteria?
Hi, Lauren. It's me again. Uh, have you ever seen an instance where the TA program project is associated with, say, a federal grant that the community has won, and execution of the project through the TA program is just an element of it? I'm just wondering, when you spoke about leveraging investments, whether there's a connection or could be a connection between the work that's being done as part of this program, and it could also help them apply for a federal or state grant.
Yeah, I think at least the last piece of your question is sort of the goal of the program. So we, for most of the service types, we identify specific projects or recommendations that would very likely require some type of funding application in order to implement, whether that's through the state, if we're talking about some of the safety related assistance those deliverables could then be taken to apply for ODOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program and the funding they offer through that program. But we also, I think I mentioned with the Safety Action Plan development, that is intended to help a community then go for federal Safe Streets and Roads for All funding, the active transportation services, help to identify projects that can then be adopted into the MTP, so they'd be eligible for MORPC federal funds. So that's sort of the idea, is to get communities eligible for all those different funding sources. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Don't see anything in the chat, so we'll keep chugging along. I think we're pretty much at the end here. So we've talked about a couple of important dates. I mentioned already that the call for applications is open. We opened that on Monday this week, so September 16th. And that can be accessed through the form stack link that's available on our website. There are 3 weeks left to apply. The deadline to submit applications is Friday, October 11th. And then once the applications are in, the evaluation committee will meet and assess all of the applications, and awardees will be notified on or before November 15th. So our goal is to hold scoping meetings with awardees before the end of this year, so that we can launch services first thing in January. And these dates should all be listed within the program guide as well. That is all we have for you today. So are there any final questions about any of the content, program guide, the process, anything? Now's your chance. Well, if you have any other questions that come up in the meantime, feel free to reach out to myself or Jordan Petrov. And we look forward to seeing your applications. Thanks so much, everyone.